The Prophet ﷺ is a human being. And as a human being, he is susceptible to all the vagaries of human perception and human narration. We don't narrate about what God said, what God did today, yesterday, tomorrow. The way that we relate to God is through God's revelation. The Prophet ﷺ, as a human being, is a different matter. He is susceptible to all the things that human beings encounter. He will have wives that he will interact with, and there will be ups and downs. He will have friends, he will have relatives, he will have people who are jealous, he will have people who are greedy, he will have people who are opportunists, he will have children. Some of these children will die, some of these children were married with, and thus there will be, through all these interactions, the opportunity for all the participants in the interactions to weigh in with their perceptions, their understandings, their memories, all their subjectivities. Because again, we are dealing with a human being. Now, and if we've already encountered this, subhanallah, in a later revelation, in Surah Al-Mumtahina. But if you relate to God through the medium of the subjectivities of the humanness of those who interacted with the Prophet ﷺ, you might get lost, because ultimately, so just yesterday I was reading some material about the age of Aisha when she married the Prophet ﷺ. And I am increasingly convinced that the historical evidence clearly clearly would lead one to the clear conclusion that Aisha could not have been under 16 years old when she married, and she was between 16 and 20 years old. One of these days, inshallah, if we do the Sira project, I'll walk you through the evidence, but the evidence is just numerous and cumulative. And that the narrations that tell us that she was 9 years old when she married came through certain venues, again, that had their own interests in, and their goal was to say that when Aisha entered the political field, and in fact there is a narration that says that Aisha would play with toys right before she right around the time of the Battle of the Camel. Something so, you would think, something so basic as the age of the one of the Prophet's wives when she married the Prophet ﷺ. But the fact of the matter is that the record is historically unclear. Not only for Aisha, but for nearly all the wives. Their age of birth, and the age of birth of most of the Sahaba, by the way, is contested because the age of death is something very different. But the age of birth, because until these people converted to Islam, and until there was an Islamic state, no one really cared about documenting the date of birth and even the date of death. People only became concerned with the date of death when Muslims developed the practice of writing and chronicling, writing chronicles. And then it became a question of interest. But by then, you had chronicles like everything that has to do with history is narrated often by people who have an interest in narrating history. The more interested people, the people with the strongest incentives are usually the ones most involved in narrating. If you're lucky, you'll get someone who really, is not vested in any personal interest, but just narrates for the sake of narration. But people don't realize how rare that is. If the age of the wives of the Prophet والسلام, was that important, was core to the faith, like the text of the Quran, Allah would have preserved it. Allah didn't Allah allowed these issues to be contested because the challenge is to understand the nature of history, not to make your faith contingent, as you often hear from young Muslim kids that write and say, "Oh, I'm experiencing a crisis of faith because of this report about the Prophet." You're experiencing a crisis, then you misunderstand faith. You can't approach faith through the vagaries of history. Your faith has to come from God's speech to you, not from the narrations of human beings that went through their subjectivities.